Well, good day, friends. Welcome to Courageous Conversations. And it's great to have you here. If you're new to this channel, please like, subscribe, share. It's really important to you, the growth of people hearing the story, that we share this as far and as wide as possible. It just helps the channel grow a little bit. If you would like to ask us a question, we would love to have as many questions as we can get. Yeah, we don't always have the answers, but sometimes the discussion is as interesting as getting or having the answer. So, yeah, just give it to us. You can email me. My email address will appear down below, and it will be great if you just responded to that. This month, November 2020, is an exciting month, but also a sad month for you, Ken, because Ken, after 40 years, 41 years, that's a long time. It's longer than I've been alive. Is retiring from ministry. And so what we thought of this session, we talk about Ken's ministry, but also what he's found exciting and what he's struggled with, and all that kind of questions around giving your life to something and something that you're passionate about.
Well, I have to say I'm slightly reluctant about the subject, as you well know, and obviously hopefully there'll be reflections that you can chip in on, Justin, and also that other people can identify with. Yeah. So hopefully if there's a story to be told, it's a story that might in some way help other people as well as just telling one person's story. Yeah.
Well, let's start at the very beginning. When Moses was around, you were there in the beginning, weren't you?
I was first across the Red Sea.
Yeah. Well, what was it growing up that made you feel that this was something you wanted to give your life to?
My standard reply to that kind of question back in my teenage or my student years and my early ministry was I didn't want to be a minister, but somehow felt kind of compelled. Now, that was a slight kind of nod to the idea of being called to some kind of mission or ministry, but not necessarily feeling all that willing. So again, there is the Moses echo there, but I think, I never felt entirely up to the job. I always felt, I'll try and, I'll do my best, but, I suppose there were high standards in my head about what a ministry was, what a minister was, but I thought, well, I'll try. I did have no sense of wanting to have a wealthy career. I wasn't interested in being rich and famous at any level. I wasn't cynical about those who pursued that, but it wasn't for me. I was interested in people and what made people tick, and the hurts and the hopes, the faith and the fears, this navigation of life's oceans was always interesting. And of course, I came from a Christian background. In my more narrow evangelical days, I wasn't sure how Christian my parents were, but looking back on it, I was wrong and they were right. And I wasn't judgmental, but I was probably much narrower than I would be happy with now. Yeah. So mixing the Christian faith with a sense of not wanting to do anything too materialistic, and wanted to help people, and I kind of thought, well, I'll try ministry.
Yeah, and it's an interesting kind of journey. We've spoken in the previous episode about being a minister, but that decision to go and be a minister, I always think, well, for me at least, it was about stumbling into it. I never said, right, this is exactly what I'm going to do. It was more like, oh, here I am. I've sort of stumbled into this thing.
Yeah, that's a nice. I can identify just exactly with that, Justin. Yeah, and I never had any kind of grand plan. Mm-hmm. And you had a hope that in those days, particularly, there was a kind of hope that in some way, God would in some way work through me and my ministry. I wasn't thinking it would be through me, but somehow I could be a conduit and a vehicle, a medium, and that hopefully, good things would happen, that people would grow in faith, and that a church would be helped by my ministry and would increase I can remember in the early days thinking, it'd be nice if the congregation's going to grow. Well, looking back on it, that seems like a kind of forlorn hope now, given the culture of the last 20, 30, 40 years. But that was the hope. And there were stories around of congregations that were really, growing and doing exciting things with a huge spiritual dynamic, mainly very conservative evangelical, and in those days some charismatic Pentecostal type things. But the reality was different.
Yeah. And when you came into the church in the 80s, maybe a little bit before, a year before.
I came here in 79.
Yeah. My brother was born the year before that, so it just shows you how long you've been here. There was a stereotypical view of what a minister was. I'm thinking of those of you who are overseas or might be watching from a different time period. There were a lot of Scottish skits at the time about what a traditional Church of Scotland minister looked like.
I Am Jolly.
I Am Jolly. Is it?
Ricky Fulton, yes.
Yeah, which is a very well-educated, prim and proper, dog collar wearing, robe wearing, very stern, strict.
Forbidding more than fun.
Yes.
And I suppose I liked the idea of being anti and different. I suppose I was quite happy. I was very sporty, and I played rugby, and I came here, I played squash, I went running, I skied. I did lots of things that in those days people were slightly surprised at, to say, and I'm a minister. And of course, when I went places as a young man, you'll get the same. People say, what do? You kind of try to avoid the question, but when you get it, you're quite pleased if people are surprised because, you seem normal.
Yeah.
Now, that's was more pronounced then than it is now because there are fewer ministers. Yeah. And we've had a generation where people are not so public in terms of dog collars and so forth. So, but yes, I liked the thought that I was, jeans and trainers and my old rugby jersey, and I don't mean for Sundays, but my everyday attire was relatively casual. And some of my elders at the time were highly disapproving. And my session clerk, when I first came here, certainly was very traditional and was very disapproving of this young minister and his non-ministerial ways.
Yeah, I read something the other day that when they were looking for a minister for St Bryce, there were some criteria. The first one was not a woman.
Yes.
Had to have published or had written about their studies.
A book, yeah.
Wasn't their first charge.
Over 40, yes.
And over 40. And Ken hit none of those except the fact that you weren't a woman.
Correct.
But I think it speaks to a conservative nature of the time. Not a woman. Had to be well educated. It speaks to what type of minister was in the minds of people.
It also speaks to the mindset of this congregation. The old St Bryce deal felt themselves to be a little bit, a cut above. It was a bit more middle class. It was pretty exclusively middle class, and with quite a lot of professional people. And it was very much the kind of, we're a slightly superior church. Now, they wouldn't come out and say that, but that was the kind of culture. And I didn't fit in with any of that.
Yeah.
And I did wonder at one stage if I'd made the wrong choice. But in time, I guess it was the right choice, but it was a struggle.
I'm laughing a little bit earlier about you saying that, you used to ski and all that, and then people couldn't believe you were a minister. I remember at my cricket club, I played cricket, and I didn't tell them what I did. And the first couple of weeks in the change room, it was a typical cricket room banter.
Yeah.
And the language was choice until they worked out what I did. And there was one or two people who were like, this is, I don't know how to speak around it now, is he judging me? But it's always just interesting to see people's responses.
And I'd grown up playing, one of my passions as a schoolboy was rugby, both watching it and playing it, and I continued, and for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years after school, but I had to stop because of injury. But I loved rugby, and I loved, looking back on it, I never felt really any different. I had a kind of more religious upbringing and a bit more, kind of faith commitment than any of the others that I was aware of, but I felt totally at home with it, and, and that's maybe not true. There were some of the songs I didn't want to join in, but basically it was just a bunch of guys together, and I've always enjoyed that. I mean, it's something that in ministry, if you're not careful, you get separated from. And the kind of, not the rougher element, but just the common human element is something that I need to have kept in touch with.
So you said you came into ministry to be with people. So what is the thing in your 40 years have you learned most about people?
That's a huge, what a question. I think but we don't have all the answers. Sometimes people feel that if they question what they have believed or certain principles, that somehow is failure. And I want to say, I don't think that's failure. I think that's growth. You can't expect people to be saints. That a congregation is full of. I'm not big on this whole sin and guilt thing. That is so saddled the Christian church. But there is an element in which, as human beings, we're all fallible, we make mistakes, of course we do. And learning to accept that. Maybe I would have said that I did have a little bit of a mantra that knowing all is forgiving all. Now, what I used to mean by that was, I can think of some people in the congregation that might have been really difficult, they might have been quite hurtful to me, they could be snippy, or they could be, etc. And then you kind of get to know their story and you understand what they've been through. And when you understand more of what people have been through, you are able to make much greater allowance for the way they are. And actually to say, well, I can understand why you're like that. And if people feel angry or disillusioned, for example, if somebody's wrestling with a cancer or there's some kind of terminal thing going on, and they express anger or just despair, my response is, if I was in your situation, I would feel exactly the same. I don't feel set apart or different or stronger. I just want to feel coming alongside people. So there's a few thoughts there maybe.
Yeah, and it's almost like a circle, because you come with your theology and your understandings of the world, and then you encounter people, and
it doesn't always match.
It doesn't, like, how do I align what I know, what I think I know, and what I see,
Exactly.
And if you have a good way of looking inward, you'll start to use your experience, and it changes you. It changes your views, and the world doesn't fit into neat boxes anymore. So
but some famous general somewhere, you might remember who it was, said something like, "No battle plan survives contact with the enemy." It's something along those lines, and that's true of particularly a young Christian's theology. One example I would offer might be that in the early days we had lots of baptisms, and it was commonplace, and people came from little church connection, but to get the baby done, this was the thing, and often from a kind of perspective of trying to apply standards. You say, well, you have to believe in this, and you have to come to church, and you have to be a member, and so forth. There were all these criteria that you, as young ministers, we were expected to say, if you don't fit these, then I'm sorry, I can't baptize your child. Now, I never refused to baptize any child. And if I'd never seen the couple beforehand, I would often say to them, well, come along, be part of the church, see how you like it, get it home, but then I would baptize the child, no questions asked. But I did ask a little bit. But then if you're faced with a family whose child is dying, or who's a baby who has just died, they have no real church connection, but they have this need for some help, some assistance. So, hospital chaplains would get this, and filling in for hospital chaplain, or sometimes through my own contacts, you'd get a phone call saying, please come to Forth Park, the local maternity hospital, and you're faced with this young couple and family breaking their hearts, and you're looking at this, might be a dead baby, and I can remember one in particular vividly that was just looked perfect, like a china doll. but was just white because she had died. The family utterly bereft. Am I going to say, excuse me, are you members of the church? Do you believe in Christ? Have you, did I? Of course not. You just throw that out the window and you just think, you would do anything to help support and give love and comfort as best you can. So, was it a baptism in church terms? Probably improper, maybe not. Do I care? Not a jot.
Yeah.
So I go along and I say what I think will help them. To some extent, what's expected. It would not necessarily sit easily with my theological training, but my pastoral instincts totally overrode that. That's the kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think that the danger in all expressions of faith is that we make them into their own God, and what I mean by that is that they become they're not servants to the ministry we do. They become pillars, or they almost become bricks in a wall instead of helping us serve the community that we live in.
Yes.
Good. So, all that said, you've encountered people. How has that changed your perception of God? I mean, I'm pretty sure, I don't view God the same way I did a year ago. How has your experience with people impacted faith, understanding?
Changing all the time, Justin. And if I could throw in another area of ministry, one of the things I came in with was a passion for the church to adapt and become more relevant. I saw the church even 40 years ago, the traditional church of the 50s and 60s, as being a little out of touch with modern culture. There were huge social changes happening in the 1960s with pop music and the pill and
the sexual revolution,
all of that hugely significant for the whole of society and impacting on the church. And then there were different attitudes to divorce, and of course, ultimately, or later than that, different attitudes towards being gay and homosexuality and so forth. So really, a period of enormous transition and turmoil. And also, worship needed to be made more relevant and more up to date, more contemporary. And the words in worship that expressed what a generation of 19th century people, or longer, further ago, thought about God, struck me as being utterly irrelevant, and still do. I do find it difficult even still to choose hymns where the words actually mean something that we can understand. Yeah. And of course, there's been a marvellous flourishing of more contemporary word writing for hymns. I think of John Bell and Graham Wall and the Iona community and everything that followed from that. That just wonderful to have stuff that actually connects with the world. And yet, I have to say, I will occasionally choose a hymn that everybody knows and loves, and we sing with great gusto in the days when we can sing.
Hobgoblins.
Hobgoblins and Foul Fiends was a pet hate of mine.
I say it every week, but every time we talk, but it's true. It's just like, I don't know about you, I don't see any hobgoblins running around.
But on the other hand, I have to say, I have chosen that hymn occasionally just because I love the hymn. And it's symbolically, if you can get behind, has so much religious language we've talked about, if you get behind the symbolism, that there is still some kind of meaning there. Yeah. But there are hymns where you just kind of think, don't think too much about the words, let's just enjoy the music.
Yeah, there's a wonderful interview, and I think it speaks to the change of culture in the UK in particular, between John Cleese, and I can't remember what talk show he was on, and the Life of Brian had just been released in the UK, yes. And they had one of the bishops of the Church of England, and they were having a go at John Cleese, and the whole thing was this kind of back and forth, but you could see in that interview that John Cleese was riding a wave of people's understanding of how the church was starting to become out of date for the modern culture, and this Church of England bishop couldn't see it.
Yeah.
Couldn't see it, and I mean that's just even more. The gulf is even further now than that.
There was another gulf. That was the gulf between the minister and the people. Being, as they used to say, 6 feet above contradiction.
Yeah.
But in that whole area, for example, of communion and sacrament, whereas I tended to feel I was one of the group. And that, as it says in Corinthians, you all eat together. Instead of this, I take it first, and then now there's the magic. You can spread the magic to the elders, and then through the elders you can spread the magic to the congregation. That kind of cascade element. I've never been comfortable with that theology. I wanted to say it's a shared meal. We're in this as one, and that's a kind of born out also of a kind of egalitarian sense that if God is one with us, then we are all one with Him. I just don't get the priestly thing, which of course is high in the Catholic Church and some other Episcopal churches. Yeah.
I mean, back in 300-400 years ago, structure where society was less structured, these kind of things were kind of necessary. It's
the office floor.
Yeah, you're in trouble. The next thing I wanted to ask you about, in the last 40 years, what has been, or how do you think you've changed? I mean, it's changed you. Yeah.
How have I changed in the last 40 years? Oh, golly. Again, what a question. Well, I think I used the phrase once, which I don't know if I can remember it exactly, where I thought, I feel less and less certain about more and more. I think maybe that wasn't the phrase, but it was, there are things where you're more interested in having an openness. How have I changed in terms of ministry terms? I think I have changed, in the sense that I have maybe a greater acceptance of people with, kind of as I alluded to earlier, who've been through stuff. I've listened over the years to possibly hundreds of harrowing stories of people who have had the most awful experiences that I have never come close to experiencing personally. But I like to think, I'm privileged to have been given that element of confidence that people have to share some of their most hurtful, sometimes stories that don't reflect well on the individual. They're sharing vulnerability. They're maybe sharing mistakes and regrets. And there have been some stuff which when you first hear it, for example, to do with abuse of various kinds, particularly sexual abuse. You find quite shocking, and rightly so. But I read up about it. You talk about it. I've been lucky to find somebody that I could go to who was a professional in the field and just get some kind of supervision and support as a counsellor, not officially a counsellor, but providing counselling support. And therefore, I do kind of feel there's not a lot, I don't think, that now that I could hear that would either surprise or shock. And therefore there's a kind of confidence a little bit in that, that says, I would like whoever is wanting to share something to be able to say, it's okay, you're not alone in this, you're not the only one who's been through this. And indeed, I'm comfortable, don't worry about me, you can tell me whatever you feel, whatever you've been through, whatever you want. And it will neither, I will not reject you, no matter what you tell me about what's been done to you or what you have done. And I feel quite pleased that I can do that, I think.
Yeah. There's enough shame and guilt in the world. I don't think ministers need to add it.
Absolutely not.
And I think...
and I think that's the Jesus model.
Yeah. That story where Jesus looks at the woman caught in adultery and just looks at it and just, I love the fact that he says, that sin cost the first stone. But even nobody asks the question, where's the peeping Tom? I mean, why were you peeping? And where's the man? But Jesus just looks at this woman with compassion, and it's just a beautiful story. one of the things I love about you, or you have taught me, is to value the small and the insignificant. When Ken and I go walking, Ken, you're the only person I know that laughs at swallows flying past you, swooping past you, but or you'll be like, oh, look at that, how beautiful is that, or oh, just, you know, and I absolutely love it because it's that idea of stopping and noticing the small and the insignificant. And I think I've just seen a little bit of your ministry, a sliver, but because most of it happened while I was growing up.
Before you were born.
Before I was born. But I think that has been something that is true of you, is that you have looked at the people that society has thrown away, the insignificant, and you smiled and you've enjoyed them and you've enjoyed this community, and it's evident that the people here love you and you love them.
Oh, well, Justin, that's a very kind and a much appreciated observation. Yes, it certainly would be nice if that's the truth of it, and if that can be seen. And I do. It's been a great privilege to be to have a community around it. And I did say, I've said it once or twice in my ministry in terms of what is it about, and I've maybe expressed this to you. If I had to sum it up in one phrase, I would say I've been trying to build Christian community. I think the idea of community is so important, and ever more. We're looking now at the situation of lockdown and separation. People are we have communication, but having communication is not the same as living in community, and that we really have to get back to being able to be feeling part of and experiencing a sense of community one with the other. And within the church, Christian community is something special. And it's easy, as we do, to talk about the negativity sometimes in the church or the failures, but there's some wonderful, wonderful things happen in terms of caring, in terms of people following up needs and thinking about others and giving generously to causes. And you know, I mean, I remember one guy came to me years ago after a major natural disaster, and he told me, he said, my wife and I, we booked a holiday, we booked a cruise, but we've cancelled it, and we're giving the money to the appeal. You know, and it was thousands. You know, and I just, he wasn't telling anybody else, and it just, it's such a privilege to, and I remember somebody else who was recently joined the congregation many years ago, or trying to organise something, and she came up to me and she said, oh, there's so many wonderful people in this church, and I thought, oh, you know, that's nectar to the minister, just thinking that's what's lovely to hear. Yeah. Doesn't take it away from the other side, because equally, we all make mistakes. And
yeah. I mean, and there's some things you'll get right, and some things you got wrong. And again, it's that idea of a minister being superhuman, and actually, we're just people. We're just people at the end of the day, and we make mistakes. We are as fallible as the people that walk through this door. So, what is next for Ken Froude?
Oh, I have no idea. Yeah, I mean, I just want to. I mean, I would like to leave things with people with something. The metaphor I've used is, you know, that one about, you know, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, etc. You know how it finishes. And I think I would like the thought that when I'm no longer here, another metaphor would be to start fires. You know, you want to just kindle something in somebody's mind and spirit and heart. That will be a spiritual awareness, and maybe a hunger for knowledge, a desire to open themselves up, you know, just some kind of spiritual fire that will continue to burn. And I would like the thought that, you know, once I'm no longer here, then the smouldering fires will continue in the hearts and lives of people, and that other people will be helped by that. In terms of what I personally do, I just haven't a clue. I mean, I was hoping to retire in the summertime. In which case I was wanting to get out on my bike or in the garden or go for walks, and or the motorbike. That's the other thing, which is not supposedly ministerial, you know.
If you ever want to seeing Ken in leathers.
No, not a pretty sight. But I have thoroughly enjoyed my runs on the motorbike. Not all that many, but when I've had. As recently this summer up to Braemar and back on a sunny, dry day, just brilliant, quiet roads. I could rhapsodise about about that. But I had hoped to have more of that. Clearly, going into December, January, and with all the restrictions, it's going to be a big transition for me, Justin. And I don't underestimate it. It will be difficult, but I'm happy just to try and get to the tape, still running hard, and then when the race is over, I'll re-navigate and recalibrate. I just not sure, but I won't be cutting myself off from friendships, both in the church and with colleagues, and I certainly won't be losing interest in the church generally. But I'm certainly not going to plunge straight into some kind of ministry, locum work, or something of that nature. But I will always want to help and hopefully have some involvement in the future.
Good. Yeah. So I wanted to thank you for being a good friend. Ken has made life for me a lot easier coming into the parish. We've said this before. I'm really upset that you're leaving. You chose terrible timing.
Again, I've said yes, as we have said. Your timing is lousy.
Yeah.
Because it would be as you would think to me, because it would have been good to be working together for a longer period. But
there is a deep friendship, and I can only wish you the best. And I hope you give time to the things that are important to you, to your family, and just to yourself. And
well, the feelings are the same, Justin, and I've thoroughly enjoyed the friendship that has developed between us, and I want to do everything I can to support you, but not to get in your way. And we know each other well enough for that not to be an issue, because that will be made clear. Yeah. But you've got big challenges ahead, and I would want to wish you well in that and to support you in any way I possibly can, and you and your family.
Thank you. So as you can see, there's a ray of light on Ken. It's almost.
I know, isn't that kind of?
It's it's almost divine. Yeah. Friends, we're going to take a bit of a break coming up to December for Courageous Conversations, but that doesn't mean we don't want your questions.
It just means we've lost courage.
We just lost, yeah. Christmas is a time where we give resources, and this Christmas we're going to have to give a lot more resources to editing and doing things online for the churches. But in January we are coming back. Ken might be retired by then, but still be conversations, and we have some guests that'll come in as well. Looking forward to just being having a broader conversation than two white men sitting on a couch talking about the world. So looking forward to that. And also, we're also going to have one change where we're going to do one a month, but we're going to do a more researched and more engaged. So friends, it'd be great if you would join us for that. So we will see you in the second week of January on a Wednesday. I don't know what the date is, but it'll be in the description. And it'll be good to catch up, and look forward to seeing you there. Have a lovely Christmas, and thank you, Ken.
Well, many thanks, Justin, and many thanks for the questions and for your interest and support. It's been great.